Chapter 15, Monday, July 17th. Luke paddled like a 4-year-old at his first swimming test. Just keeping his upper lip above water seemed almost impossible. This was crazy. He had a bronze badge from the Red Cross. Why was he so helpless? Panic and shock, he thought, and fear. He was trembling all over. Stay close to the boat. That was the first rule for a man overboard. But a widening pool of burning gasoline was spreading around the Phoenix, making it look like the waves themselves were on fire. Luke found himself drifting farther and farther from the ship. If he got separated from the others, only the fish would find him. Luke! It was a faint call from the gloom. Will! The voice seemed to be coming from miles away, although Luke was sure Will couldn't be very far. Will, are you okay? He shouted. No answer. Luke looked around, fighting hysteria. The sun was down. Detail disappeared against the incandescent orange of the fire. He saw nothing except there it was, a flash of color a few yards away. He made for it, splashing wildly. In the pool at the Y, it would have been a 10-second swim. But now, here, it was a distant marathon. Will! Luke's voice was breathless and unsteady. Nothing. And then his flailing arms smacked right into it, a 6-foot piece of the Phoenix's cabin top floating in the water. The corner glowed like hot coals. Luke used his weight to submerge the smoldering portion. With a puff of steam, the fire was out. He hauled himself on top and lay back, gasping. Ow! His head banged against something hard. He rolled over to find himself staring at a steel gray smoke head vent. It was the galley ceiling. Must have been broken off and thrown free when the explosion launched the stove overboard. That's why it was still in one piece when most of the deck and cabin had been blown to toothpicks. Will! He called again with a growing urgency. The Phoenix was completely engulfed in flames now. As he watched, a large charred section of stern broke off and disappeared below the waves. The rest of the schooner resettled itself, rocking to and fro into a new balance. Could there be anybody alive on there? Surely he wasn't the only one left. Will! He bellowed. Lissa! Ian! Charla! A pause. JJ! He'd even be happy to see JJ at this point. Luke! It was Will. No question about it this time. Careful not to lose his balance on the cabin top, Luke rose to his knees. It was almost completely dark now. Then he saw it, a flailing arm. He stood up. Did he dare stand up? There, 20 yards away, someone, Will, was rolling in and out of the waves, clinging desperately to a mangled deck plank. Luke flung himself back on his stomach and began to paddle. He looked up. Will wasn't an inch closer. Here in the open ocean, the wave action canceled out whatever progress he could manage. To save Will, he was going to have to swim for it. Swim for it? Was he nuts? He was weak, could hardly force his arms into a dog paddle. A few minutes ago, he barely made it to the cabin top, 10 feet away. This was 5 times that distance, at least. And the same again coming back, dragging Will, who might be hurt or burned. It was insanity. He'd drown the both of them. I can't hang on much longer, Will called. The distance was made. The decision was made. A slim chance was better than no chance at all. Luke threw himself off the cabin top and hit the water. He drove each stroke deep into the waves, fighting the sea and his own exhaustion. His eyes stung from the salt, but he forced himself to keep them open. Can't lose him. Can't lose him. He tried to call Will's name and came up choking on seawater. Alone. Where was Will? Oh no, he'd lost Will. In a frantic look backwards, he could no longer see the floating cabin top. He'd given up his raft, his one chance at survival, for nothing. And then a wave broke, and Luke saw him still clinging to the piece of deck. Will! Luke blurted. The boy's face was completely blackened with soot. Will blinked in amazement. Luke! In that instant, Luke realized he must look the same. He struggled to focus his racing mind on what was important. Can you swim? I'm not sure. Will seemed aimless and confused. I found a piece of wood. Hang on to it, Luke commanded. I'll help us float. Grabbing Will Red Cross style. Oh, how he wished he'd paid better attention in that life-saving class. Luke started back in the direction of the cabin top. We'll find it, he told himself. If they didn't, they'd both drown. Side stroke, shuttle kick. Will's dead weight threatened to drag him down. There's a cabin top floating ahead, Luke managed to say behind tortured breaths. His paddling arm throbbed with pain. Can you see it? Too dark, replied Will. He sounded sleepy. Try, Luke demanded, wasting a precious strength shaking his friend. It's around here somewhere. It has to be. There's nothing, insisted Will, a little more alert. Agony pulsed from every muscle in Luke's body, from his cramped feet to the aching knuckles that were locked onto Will's shoulder. It'd be so easy to give up right now. There'd be no grace in that. Who could have expected him to make it this far? The call to quit radiated from the very core of his being. Just let go, it seemed to say. Surrender to the waves. Wait a minute, came Will's voice. What's that? Luke kicked like he had never kicked before, as if he had reached down and opened a hidden supply of emergency energy. He screamed as he swam, from pain and rage, but mostly from sheer effort. Whoomp! His head knocked against something. This is it, he exclaimed. Will, we found it. Luke pushed Will, plank and all, onto the cabin top. Then he scrambled on himself and collapsed, choking and gasping. The others! Lissa, asked Will. Luke could only shake his head. Nobody? They turned to face the Phoenix. It was a floating bonfire. White hot flames covered every inch of the schooner, except the very peak of the foremast. The bow, which had hung so low, was now pointed up like a cannon as water flooded into the ruined stern. They abandoned ship, said Will. They must have. Using the deck plank as an oar, Luke paddled alongside the doomed ship, looking for a path through burning gasoline and coated the sea. Hey! Came a voice. Over here! Where? Chorused Luke and Will. It was pitch dark now. The fire was the only light on the moonless night. Suddenly, Luke saw a faint glimmer of canvas struggling through the waves, and attached to it. Ian! Luke cried. Drop that sail! We need it! Ian insisted, panting along. For what? Luke and Will almost capsized, hauling Ian onto their raft. The young boy was ready to sink to the bottom of the ocean rather than let go of a large piece of half-charred foresail and a yellow rubber rain hat. Quickly, Luke rolled to the far end of the cabin top to restore balance. The raft wobbled dangerously for a moment, then stabilized. Where are the others? Asked Luke. Ian shrugged helplessly. I was with JJ, but we got separated. What about my sister? Demanded Will. I thought she was with you. She was, Will was frantic, but she disappeared in the explosion. And Charla? Asked Luke. She was. Ian's eyes fell on a flaming hulk of the Phoenix. Oh, God. With an audible groan, the burning schooner seemed to give up the fight before their very eyes. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, the ship slipped into the sea, following the angle of its raised bow. A split second before it disappeared beneath the waves, a dark shape plunged off the tip of the foremast. It was a desperation dive, yet it was perfect. A graceful arc, and then the slim figure slipped into the ocean with barely a splash. It could only have been one person. Charla, they chorused. Pointing straight up to the sky, the flaming bowsprit of the Phoenix sank out of sight. CNC's schooner was no more. There was a mournful hiss as the ocean extinguished the blazing wreck. Suddenly, all the light was gone, save for the few patches of burning gasoline. Luke picked up the plank and began paddling toward the spot where the girl had entered the water. Charla! I hope she knows to splash around and make noise, Ian said. Style counts for nothing when you're being rescued. They made their way through the gloom, bellowing her name. Over here! She was plowing through the waves in a textbook freestyle. Luke had to smile. Maybe we can tie her to the raft and she'll tow us home. The light mood didn't last. As they heaved Charla on board, the cabin top overbalanced, flipping them all into the water. Several more tries gave the same result. It's too much weight, Ian shouted, treading water. This thing won't hold more than 3 of us. What are we supposed to do? Asked Charla, her voice shrill with panic. Go eeny meeny and the loser drowns? Nobody's going to drown, panted Luke. You 3 climb on. I'll hang on the side. Charla was aghast. Are you crazy? You're shark bait. We'll switch every few hours, Luke decided. It's going to get more crowded when we find the others. Cupped his hands to his mouth. Lissa, JJ. But his calls went unanswered. And when the last of the gasoline had burned out, the cabin top bobbed and rolled in a silent world of limitless black.